So you think Yahweh permits no-fault divorce? You think Yeshua permits no-fault divorce? Well, my friends, you're very, very wrong. Make this part 3 of 4 just about this topic. Why does Yeshua indict one of the churches in Revelation for forgetting their first love? Isn't that a suggestion that Yahweh prefers reconciliation over divorce and remarriage? I don't know. Maybe these messianic and Christian teachers are really onto something when they say that when they were done with that person they were previously with, they were truly done. In Blasphemies 119, it states, because Joseph, her husband, we're talking about Mary and Joseph here, was unfaithful to that burdensome evil law and did not get his morning eggs cooked over medium as he preferred them, he had in mind to divorce her quietly. Oh wait, but that's not what it says. You see, in the real verse, Matthew chapter 1 and verse 19, it states, and Joseph, her husband, being righteous or faithful to the Torah and not wanting to make a show of her, had in mind to put her away secretly. So Joseph suspected that Miriam committed adultery, but we know that she didn't, obviously. However, he would have known in the first century that his only right to a separation or a divorce would have come if Mary stepped outside of the bounds of their legal marriage and committed adultery. Past the stage of erusin, which is when a couple gets engaged in Torah, having sexual relations with somebody else would call for the death penalty. But we see that Joseph valued mercy over referring Mary to the authorities to put her to death. Now, people always assume that the prescribed punishment for everything in Torah was carried out 100% of the time. But how can this be true when Yaakov, or James, says in chapter 2 and verse 13 of his letter, mercy triumphs over judgment, because judgment without mercy will be shown to anyone who has not been merciful. Now, while I want to offer more insights on what Matthew 1:19 tells us about how divorce should only be for the purpose of sexual impropriety, I want to go here to Deuteronomy chapter 23 and verse 14. And the reason is because messy Gnostics use this verse to say that divorcing their wife for any reason is okay. That's why I used that satirical verse earlier to make a point. Oh, she didn't boil my eggs right. She didn't fold my laundry right. I'm so tired of hearing from her all the time. Well, in Deuteronomy chapter 23 and verse 14, we read about Yahweh's war camp and how he expects it to be set apart. For Yahweh your Elohim walks in the midst of your camp to deliver you and give your enemies over to you. Therefore your camp shall be Kodesh, or set apart, so that he does not see unclean matter or ervat davar among you, and shall turn away from you. So people make the argument that because this is about human feces within the camp, that means that when ervat davar is used again in Deuteronomy 24, when you find some sort of indecency in your wife, that can cover just about anything. But this is completely wrong. Rather, what should be logically deduced from these passages of Torah is that Yahweh finds the act of adultery on the part of a woman, which leads her husband to find her to be indecent, to be as disgusting as human feces. Yes, adultery can be likened to being just as disgusting as human feces. We cannot deduce from these passages that Yahweh allows this big wide umbrella of arbitrary reasons to divorce, otherwise we open this Pandora's box. Do you want more proof? Isn't it no wonder then why Yahweh tells Ezekiel to bake a specific bread recipe over human excrement in front of the people of Israel and Judah to symbolize their harlotry? What Yahweh is effectively saying is that spiritual and physical adultery are just as disgusting as eating bread baked over human excrement. And it so happens that physical adultery always followed spiritual adultery, because first you worship pagan gods. and then you're permitted to engage in pagan rites or sex orgies, effectively. Now, Yeshua came to say that he gave divorce for one primary reason, and that's because of the hardness of heart. Now, hardness of heart can manifest in a multitude of ways, but these multitude of ways always fall under the two primary ways that the hardness of heart manifests. Towards Yahweh, with our spiritual adultery, or in other words, our idolatry with other gods and even ourselves, and in physical adultery, which would be the hardness of heart towards our partner, our marriage partner, our spouse. So scriptures are there so that we can see the interlinking between our relationship with God or Yahweh and our relationship with our spouse. Or you could even think about how important Yahweh's words are in this fashion. Today I went rafting, and we had to deal with a level 3 current going down a fast river. Now, the instructor said, "Listen carefully to my instructions." And I essentially had to treat him as a manifestation of God and do whatever he said, whether it was to raft forward, raft backwards, watch for boulders and rocks, etc., etc. If we treated Yahweh in like fashion, because we wanted to avoid falling off of that boat, so to speak, into the river and hurt our heads or whatever, if we wanted to avoid that kind of situation spiritually, then we wouldn't be engaging in the practice of no-fault divorces and then justifying them as believers. Now, is Yahweh's will divorce even when adultery is committed? He doesn't specifically endorse divorce even when adultery is committed, but he does permit it. Yahweh hates divorce even if there's unfaithfulness in the marriage. However, he understands that when those things happen, people really have a tough time getting over it. In 1 Corruptions chapter 7 verses 10 through 11, we read, "You may divorce your wife for any reason, because this is what the Lord commands. And if a wife divorces her husband, she should engage in more serial divorces and marry as many men as she possibly can." Oh wait, hold on. That's not what it says. In 1 Corinthians 7 verses 10 through 11, we read, "To the married I give this command, not I, but Yahweh or the Lord, the Master. A wife must not separate from her husband, but if she does, she must remain unmarried or else be reconciled to her husband, and a husband must not divorce his wife." So in the general terms, when no physical adultery is occurring, a couple should stay together. Marriage is supposed to be a lifelong commitment from the time that you make your vows and then consummate them until you die. So what Yahweh is saying is that as long as no physical adultery is occurring, people should not be divorcing and remarrying whatsoever. When Yahweh set marriage in place, he said that two lifelong partners would come together and be together until death do them part. And it's the same exact way when we pledge our faithfulness to Yahweh Elohim and confess the Messiah Yeshua as Lord. And it says in the scriptures, "He who endures until the end shall be saved." So what Yahweh's ultimate intention for marriage was for the relationship between one man and one woman to endure until the very end of their lives. Now, what's interesting is the non-possessive form of the Hebrew word ervat, because it always has to go with another word, is erva, which means nakedness. And of course, when the Bible says not to uncover the nakedness of such and such person, it's always exclusively a sexual reference. So when you're saying that the Bible says that anything that a man finds indecent about his wife is a grounds for divorce, that is incorrect, my friends. Please read your scriptures. So please, brothers and sisters, for the love of everything good in Babylon, and there aren't many things, read your scriptures. Have a great evening. I'll uncover more insights in part 4.